Two soldiers on a remote hill can see something coming toward Oahu before anyone else, not with binoculars, on a brand new radar screen. They watch the line jump, then swell into a thick, crawling mass. Too large to be a mistake, too fast to be nothing. They pick up the phone and report it up the chain. And the answer that comes back is simple: don't worry. Minutes later, the sky answers instead. Pearl Harbor begins, while the warning is still trapped inside a system that can't believe it. This story isn't about a machine that failed. It's about a warning that arrived and wasn't converted into action. In late 1941, radar is still new, useful, but not yet trusted like eyes and ears. On Oahu, crews train, experiment, and learn what the screen really means. One of those sets is the SCR-270, a mobile early warning radar built to spot aircraft at distance. Powerful for its time, but it demands experience to interpret. That morning, December 7th, 1941, the Opana crew is doing what they usually do: a shift, a scope, and a routine that still feels like practice. The radar sweeps again and again, painting the air with invisible pulses. Most returns are small, strange, or empty. Then the screen changes. The return isn't a dot, it's a wide, growing presence. Privates George Elliott and Joseph Lockhart stay on it. They track it carefully because the pattern looks wrong for a normal morning. They call the warning center Fort Shafter's Intercept Center. They try to translate the screen into a sentence someone can act on. Here's the problem: early warning is a chain, not a single person. And chains break at the weakest assumption. The duty officer hears the report and tries to fit it into what he expects. A big formation on radar must have a simple explanation, or it becomes unthinkable. And there is context that morning. Friendly aircraft are expected into Hawaii, so the report gets filed under one quiet thought, likely ours. The Opana crew keeps watching. The mass keeps moving, closing distance, refusing to shrink into a harmless story. They call again, with more urgency in their voices. But urgency doesn't automatically outrank routine. A radar screen can show you the truth, and still lose to human certainty, because certainty feels safer than a sudden unknown. Meanwhile, Pearl Harbor wakes up like any other day. Ships sit in the harbor. Crews move through chores. The water stays calm. The radar return grows until it feels impossible that it's just a flight. The operators don't need to see planes yet. They can feel the scale. But the warning system hesitates. Not out of malice, out of a familiar reflex. It can't be that. As the formation closes, the contact becomes harder to read. Terrain, clutter, and the limits of early radar can swallow clean tracking. And that matters because a warning isn't a movie moment. It's signals, phone calls, interpretation, and seconds leaking away. Then the world changes in the harbor. The first explosions don't sound like a theory. They sound like reality arriving. For the radar crew, it's the worst kind of confirmation. They were not imagining it. They were early. Radar didn't fail to see. People failed to convert seeing into believing fast enough. After the attack begins, the question everyone asks is obvious. How can you have a warning and still be surprised? Because warning is not a siren. Warning is a decision. And decisions require trust. Trust in tools, in procedures, and in the idea that today can be different. That morning, radar is still treated like training equipment, a useful gadget until it becomes inconvenient. Pearl Harbor forces a brutal lesson into the system. Technology can outrun doctrine, and doctrine can outrun imagination. Afterward, early warning radar becomes impossible to dismiss. Not because it's perfect, because it's better than being blind. The United States builds bigger networks, clearer procedures, faster response chains. Because the cost of hesitation has been written into history, but the core lesson stays human. Information does not equal action. You can have the right data and still make the wrong call, especially when the right data sounds unbelievable. That's why this story hits hard. Two privates did their job, calmly, correctly, and early. They weren't in the harbor. They weren't watching the sky. They were watching the future on a screen. And the future tried to enter the system through a phone line. It met a wall made of routine. This isn't a myth about one mistake that explains everything. It's a real example of how systems behave under surprise. Pearl Harbor didn't just change strategy, it changed how armies think about warning, speed, and belief. Pearl Harbor, the radar warning they didn't believe, until it was too late. And that's the quiet tragedy behind the loudest warning. There's another detail most people miss. The Opana radar crew wasn't supposed to be on duty that long. They stayed past schedule because training felt more important than rules. Early radar work was exhausting. You stare at a glowing screen, fight fatigue, and decide whether a mark is real or just noise. And on December 7th, those marks didn't behave like noise. They behaved like a formation, steady, coherent, getting closer. In 1941, Hawaii's warning system was still being built. Radar sites existed, but the chain that turned detection into alarm wasn't fully hardened. So the report had to pass through people who'd never experienced a real inbound attack. When you've never seen it happen, your mind searches for the safest explanation. That's how friendly aircraft becomes a trap. It's not stupidity, it's the brain protecting itself from the impossible. And that is why this moment matters beyond Pearl Harbor, because every future warning, every new sensor, every new technology faces the same human test. Do you treat the signal like a threat or like an inconvenience? Do you act first or wait for certainty? Pearl Harbor turned radar from a curiosity into a necessity. From that day on, blips weren't just marks on glass. They were time. Time to scramble, time to warn, time to live. And on that morning, time was the one thing the system couldn't afford to waste. But time was already slipping away long before the first bomb hit the harbor. It was slipping away in small human pauses. In 1941, radar isn't a command. It's a suggestion made by a machine many still don't trust. At Opana, the SCR-270 can't show faces or flags. It shows motion, distance, and a return that keeps growing. The screen is doing exactly what it was built to do. The hard part is getting people to move as fast as the signal. The message reaches the Intercept Center at Fort Shafter, but action still depends on one leap, from probably to act. That leap feels expensive, because if you're wrong, you look foolish. So the mind chooses the safer risk, delay. After the attack, the story sounds simple. Radar saw it, and it was ignored. But real life is training shifts and procedures that aren't fully hardened yet. Pearl Harbor becomes a turning point, not because radar was invented there, because belief had to be built there. From that day forward, the U.S. builds faster chains, clearer rules, and faster response. Because a warning only counts if it becomes action. Those two soldiers at Opana did their part, calmly and early. But the system was still learning that in war, minutes are a weapon.